I've been watching lots of video clips about that movie Joker because I'm just really captivated by Joaquin Phoenix and his performance. Just the craftsmanship of it I can really appreciate. And the reactions I see and comments, like the people who've seen it, people are going to see it 2-3 times. And the things people are saying, it's just unbelievable. They're really identifying with this film or just being extremely moved by it. And while I want to see it because I appreciate fine acting and I really like Joaquin Phoenix. He seems like a cool person, and he brings a lot of warmth to every performance he does. There's just a twinkle in his eye, it's infectious, and no matter how dark his character, there's a few scenes in Joker that I've seen so far that his smile is heartbreaking. And so I understand why it's moving people so much, but at the same time, for me, I'll have to do a lot of, I'll have to suspend my disbelief a lot. Or should I say, I'll have to suspend my belief in the Lord when I watch it, because the story of the Joker and really of most every story we ever see portrayed on film or in any kind of media, and the stories of most people we will ever know, they can only happen in a context where one assumes that the answers to these ultimate life-defining questions are unknowable, and that God is unknowable. We can't even know if there is a God. We can't know if there's any meaning whatsoever to this existence, whether any of it amounts to anything. Our suffering, our joy, those we love, the relationships we form. We don't know who we are, why we are, where we are, whether there's anyone out there that ultimately cares. And we spend, as lost people, we spend most of our lives, maybe beyond childhood. For me, it started in childhood, and in a lot of ways robbed me of my childhood, because while I had a good childhood in terms of not having any type of abuse or trauma, in that sense, I was deeply terrified every day of my life, because I had this premature awareness of mortality, and I was so terrified of death, specifically, the death of my loved ones. I mean, it haunted me every day of my life to where I couldn't even sleep alone until I was 13, because when I'd lay down at night, close my eyes, I would immediately be confronted with the thought of, my granny or my mom dying one day. And I would, because I was scared of my own shadow when I was a kid, because my dad was letting me watch Romero films. By the time I was 3, I saw The Exorcist at 4. So I was scared just in general of, demons and zombies and all that stuff constantly, but I would try to comfort myself at night with, thoughts of things I had to look forward to, right? And one of those things would be like getting my driver's license one day, being a teenager or whatever, when I was a little kid. And I was afraid to even look forward to things, because I would immediately realize, in 6 years, my granny my granny will probably be dead, or, what will have happened by then? And I had rejected God at 7 because I thought I didn't want to know the answers. I didn't want to know the answers to these things, and it scared me to think that there could be a book that had all those answers, and it would just rob me of my imagination and my freedom and my, like the mystery to solve, right? And, I just hadn't suffered enough, because once I had, the thing is, it's really strange, is all the people that I would fear losing at night, it'd keep me up at night, because I would fear the day that I knew would inevitably come when they would be gone. Those very people are the people I lost back to back in the span of 1 year when I was like 28, 29. My mother, my grandmother, my aunt, my little cousin. And I know now it was really just, I wouldn't say like a premonition or clairvoyance, but I think that the weight of that event was so heavy that it stretched back in time and weighed on me prior to it actually happening. I could sense it coming down the road, if that makes sense. And all my worst fears were realized that year. And I had nothing to explain it, so I didn't have like a war or a plague or something to explain it. These were all sudden, unrelated deaths. And I had only God to explain it. So I realized at that point there had to be a force at work that was larger than statistical probability. And I was angry at it and was cursing God openly with my mouth. But like I said before, he considered that progress. And he turned everything around for me from that point on and showed me that, yes, this force you're finally aware of, can be incredibly compassionate and merciful and loving. But he had to get my attention first. And one night I had just had my second child. I was thinking about things, and I realized that if one of my girls came up to me one day and asked why they shouldn't just blow their brains out to spare themselves the inevitable suffering that they'd experience, when I died, or when when their dad died, or something like that, I wouldn't have an honest answer for them, because I didn't know that the truth was knowable at that time. And I remember asking myself, why do we love with a love that demands eternity, like I love my children, when we're not even promised tomorrow? Why? Why do we fear death, and why do we fear the loss of our loved ones? If ever since we've ever existed as a species, that's the only reality we've ever known. Why has the sting of death never been muted by the inevitable reality of it? It was like an epiphany, and I realized that Genesis is the only thing that really explains that. Because Genesis tells us we weren't created to know death. We weren't created to know, eternal separation from those we loved most. And that it was a fallen state, a state of dysfunction that was absolutely unavoidable. But it wasn't how things were originally. That's not how we were created. We weren't created to know and to cope with those things, and that there had to be an answer, and that Genesis said that God would provide that answer, and God would eventually make all things new. And so that was the beginning for me. I began to really think about the Bible and the wisdom and the answers that it offered. But see, if you think about it, it's incredible. Now, even if you still haven't rested in the finished work of Jesus Christ, so like even if you're thinking that that something else is required for eternal life, some work you're doing. So you're not really saved yet. But you at least know that the truth is in that book. It's in the Bible. Just think about it for a second. Think about how the majority of people spend their whole lives, especially in this country, and the millennial generation, choosing to grope around blindly in the dark, just bumping into things, tripping over things, falling flat on their face. And the light switch that is the Bible, it's there, it's illuminated. It's like, glow in the dark right there in front of them everywhere they look. And they don't try it, even though it's the only thing that they can see. They don't try it. They don't flip that switch because they think it can't be that simple. They know there's got to be a way out of this darkness. There's got to be a better way. There's got to be more to life. But they just refuse to flick that switch because that's too easy. It's too obvious. Can't be that simple. See, that there's no mystery to life in the sense that, of the big questions that haunt us all. We don't have to go through life with those questions plaguing us and the fear of the unknown motivating our every action. Because God made it very simple and plain. And He wrote a book and He put it everywhere. And He preserved it. And He made it to where anybody that wants the answer and is humble enough to turn to that book and find out what it says, they would have these answers and they would have the comfort of knowing. The one thing all of us really want to know deep down in our hearts, we all want to know that Daddy's going to make it all okay. That's why fatherlessness is so harmful. We all want to know that. And that's because, see, God the Father, He made it all okay at the cross. And all you have to do is believe that He did that He made it all okay. And you're safe forever, no matter what. And the only real thing you have to worry about is spreading that truth to others, to those you love, to just people in general. But you know that at the end of the day, He's going to wipe away every tear. He made us. That's why we're here. He made this world and He loves us. And how amazing is it to know the ultimate answer to everything is this God of just love and mercy and self-sacrifice. And people, the whole world that we see on the television and just everywhere we look, it's all just a representation of those who choose to remain in the darkness. For the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. I just wonder if anybody else ever thinks about that. So I was lost for so much of my life that I know what it's like to live in that alternate reality where you think that truth is unknowable and that it's almost pointless to ponder God because you can't ever know for sure whether it's just your imagination, whether there's anything after this at all, whether any of this amounts to anything. It's a choice. It's a choice. We choose that because we're proud, and because to know the answer for sure would make us smaller in our eyes. Despite the fact that it upholds our value, as beings, and our the truth, that the self is real, that we don't just all return to some amorphous blob when it's all over. We're made in God's image, and we can know our identity in Christ.